Hey everybody, welcome to Board Online, Board Offline. Today we're bringing you a how to play video for Xia Legends of a Drift system. Now I want to go ahead and apologize in advance for my voice. It's getting better. I filmed this video over the course of about 2 days, and when I first started it definitely was pretty rough still from a cold I had, but I feel like towards the end you might hear it start getting a little bit better maybe, but hopefully we'll be over this soon. Also, while you're watching this is for the base game, Xia Legends of a Drift system. However, I do have the expansion, and I tried to make sure no expansion parts made it into this video, but you may see some expansion cards or pieces show up every now and then. Just keep in mind that if you see something that is not like anything you have in your game, it's not that you're missing anything or that you have an outdated version or anything like that. It's just that I have the expansion, and that may show up by accident or on purpose once or twice because I threw away certain reference cards. But we'll get to that later. Also, while you're watching this how to play video, if this looks like something you are interested in, please check the description below for not only a link for the base game, but also a link for the expansion. And if you purchase it through those links, just a little bit of the proceeds will go to the channel. So Xia is a 3 to 5 player sandbox style competitive space adventure. Each player starts as a lowly captain of a small starship. They fly their ships throughout the system, completing a variety of missions, exploring new sectors, and battling other ships even. Captains vie for titles, riches, and most importantly, fame. Players achieve victory through a fame point system. Players earn fame points in 9 different ways: exploration, missions, trade, combat, wealth, ships, kindness, titles, and luck. When a player's marker on the fame point track reaches the victory token, the game is over and that player is declared the victor. Shuffle the sector tiles and place them face down in the play area. Then deal 1 sector tile per player into the play area. Place these sector tiles out one at a time, lining up an edge symbol, as you see here, of the next sector tile with one of the edge symbols of the previously laid sector tile. This is a spawn point. If a sector tile without a spawn point is drawn, remove it, shuffle it back into the deck, and draw another tile. So for a 3-player game, this could be one possible setup. Shuffle the exploration tokens and place them face down in the play area. Next, place an exploration token face down on any exploration spaces currently revealed on the game board. Shuffle the mission cards and title cards and place them into the play area. Place the cargo cubes, damage markers, outfits, credits, and dice in the play area. Give each player 1 How to Win card and 3,000 credits. Randomly deal 1 of the 3 NPC cards to each player. Obviously, in the case of a 4 or 5 player game, not every player will get an NPC card. Players then receive the corresponding miniature and place it on that NPC card. Place the fame point track in the play area. Again, you may notice this is different than yours. Ignore the pink event spots on the fame point track here. This is the expansion fame point track and varies slightly from the base game fame point track. Players now decide the number of fame points needed for victory. Average play times are 15 minutes per player for 5 points, 30 minutes per player for 10 points, and 45 minutes per player for 20 points. Once players decide how many points they'll play for, place the victory marker on that space. The players all then roll the D20, and the player with the highest roll chooses a Tier 1 ship mat. That player also takes the matching mini and ability card This continues around the table counterclockwise until each player has chosen. All players then place their mini on the spawn point of the sector tile closest to them. Each player now takes an impulse token and places it on the impulse space of the ship mat, yellow side up. The player also takes a set of markers. One marker is placed at the highest number of the ship mat's energy meter. 4 are placed on the ship mat's armed spaces. And the final one is placed on the 0 space of the fame point track. Players also take one of these tokens and place it on the base of their ship as a visual aid to help identify which ship belongs to them. Players should note that a similar token is available to identify outlaw ships. Anytime a ship has a bounty placed on it, this token is placed on the base, just like this. Players may now spend their credits to purchase outfits. The outfits are placed on the ship mat's hold. Players may only purchase what will fit in the hold, and outfits may not overlap each other. It should be noted that players are not required to spend all, or any for that matter, of their credits at this point. Finally, the player who picked her ship last goes first. And that's the setup. A player's turn consists of up to 3 phases: the action phase, the business phase, and the status phase. Once a particular phase has started, the player may not go back to a previous phase. And once the player's status phase is completed, her turn is over and play continues clockwise to the next player. At the beginning of the game, each player places one of their markers on the fame point track at 0 unknown. As a player claims fame points, she advances her marker along the fame track, with the ultimate goal being to reach the agreed upon victory fame point marker. Throughout this video, we'll discuss in detail the different ways a player may gain fame points. Ships are the player's in-game representation. Each ship has a ship mat, a mini, and an ability card. Minis occupy one space of the game board at a time. Ship mats are set face up in front of their owner and contain valuable information about the ship. Ability cards allow players to perform unique and powerful actions and are associated with individual ships. Each ship mini is placed on a flight stand, as you see here. Ships can move around the board by way of engines as well as impulse. Also, certain abilities will allow ships to move as well. Let's take a closer look at ability cards. Each ship has a unique ability card which provides the player with a power which will be unique to them for the entire game. The player will first find the ability's name here, in this case, Disruptor Field. Underneath that is a bit of text that serves both as flavor text as well as a general summary of what this ability will do. Under that is the ship the ability belongs to, as well as the tier of that ship. And then in this section here, the player will find how the ability is used. To use the ability, the player spends the energy specified at the bottom of the card, in this case 2 energy, and then follow the directions. In this case, as an action, spend 2 energy and roll a d20. Most abilities will require a d20 roll. So if I were to use this ability right now and rolled a 15, I would get that middle section. Directly after the ability has been used, flip the card face down. It is now exhausted. The ability cannot be used again until it is refreshed. Some abilities are exhausted before their effects take place, such as autopilot. Even though abilities such as this one are still being used after they are exhausted, it's important to note that they are still exhausted. And abilities will remain exhausted until the player's status phase, at which point all of her cards are refreshed. And so again, certain abilities such as autopilot will be refreshed prior to their effect taking place. When a player purchases a new ship, she will retain the ability card from all previously owned ships. So when a player purchases a tier 2 ship, she still has this tier 1 ability available. And once she purchases a tier 3 ship, both of the previous abilities are still available to her. Each player has a ship mat matching the ship she's currently using. Let's take a closer look at the information contained on a ship mat. The name is located here. Next to the name is the tier of the ship, 1, 2, or 3. Underneath the name is a picture of the mini which represents the ship. The price of the ship is the number of credits a player must pay in order to purchase the ship. The hold size number is a quick reference of the number of hold spaces on the ship. The impulse space is where the impulse token goes, and the impulse value represents the number of spaces the ship may move when activating the impulse token. The energy meter keeps track of the ship's energy, which is used for numerous different purposes throughout the game. The armed spaces are used to hold markers that are currently ready to be spent on outfits, while the disarmed spaces underneath them, here, hold markers waiting to be armed. If a bounty is placed on a player, those credits are placed here. The hold is the ship's cargo grid. Outfits and cargo cubes are kept here. Each ship has a unique layout of hold spaces. Players will need to arrange outfits in the hold to maximize the use of space. A player may not have more cargo cubes or outfits than she has space for. When a ship takes damage, the damage markers are placed into the hold. Each space can hold 1 damage marker. A damage space is no longer usable, and if a ship takes damage equal to or exceeding the number of hold spaces, that ship is destroyed. However, if a ship makes it to port without being destroyed, it can be repaired during the business phase. A ship's energy is a rechargeable resource. Energy is spent to arm markers, use abilities, and scan new sectors. To spend energy, a player simply moves his marker down the energy meter the number of indicated spaces. If a player has no energy and no armed markers, she is stranded. A stranded player cannot do anything except move using impulse and take minor actions. All ships are classified as either innocent or outlaw. A ship without a bounty is innocent. If a ship earns a bounty through unlawful actions, that ship becomes an outlaw. An outlaw ship may never enter a lawful planet through its entrance, but can still attempt to sneak through the planetary shield. There are 3 ways a player may earn a bounty. The act of crossing through a planetary shield rather than using the planetary entrance is known as evading. If the player is detected, her bounty increases by 1,000 credits, and if she was previously innocent, she is now considered an outlaw. Crime in the form of illegal missions may raise the player's bounty. This may occur through either completing or failing the illegal mission, and that information will be reflected on the card. Raiding is the act of destroying an innocent ship, which increases the player's bounty by 1,000 credits. If a ship with a bounty is destroyed by another ship, any bounty on the destroyed ship is claimed by the attacker. In the event that both ships are destroyed, the bounty is unclaimed and simply discarded. The bounty is removed under 2 conditions. Either the player's ship is destroyed or the player upgrades to a new ship. Outfits are the primary focus of the action phase. They are used to move, defend, and attack. There are 4 types of outfits: engines, shields, blasters, and missiles. Each outfit comes in 3 increasingly powerful tiers. On an outfit, the players will find the name of the outfit, the price to purchase the outfit, the die that is rolled when the outfit is used, these yellow spheres known as use spaces. Armed markers are placed on one of these when using the outfit to take an action. And finally, all outfits are divided into sections by these white lines. Each section of an outfit takes up 1 space in the hold. Outfits may be oriented in any direction, as long as every section has its own space. If an outfit won't fit inside the hold, then the player may not use it. During a player's action phase, outfits may be activated in any order, and a player may use any, all, or none of her outfits. A player uses an outfit by moving an armed marker from an armed space onto a used space, and then rolling the corresponding die. Used and disarmed markers are refreshed during the status phase, which we'll discuss a little later. The number of used spaces an outfit has is the maximum number of times it may be used in a single turn. A used space is considered available if it has no marker and no damage on it. If an outfit has no available used spaces, it may not be used. It's also important to note that outfits may only be rearranged or sold during the business phase. We'll discuss that in more detail during the business phase section of this video. Damage can also have important interactions with outfits. We'll discuss damage in more detail during the combat section of this video. As players explore the drift system, they'll discover different planets which they may interact with. In the base game of Xayah, there are 7 planets. 2 lawful planets with the blue shields, 3 neutral planets with the green shields, and 2 outlaw planets with the red shields. We'll discuss planets in more detail throughout this video. An important concept in Xayah is adjacency. Ships are always considered adjacent when they occupy spaces that are directly next to each other, regardless of any borders between them, with 2 important exceptions. If 2 ships next to each other are separated by a planetary shield or a planetary entrance, they are not considered adjacent. So while this ship and this ship are both adjacent to each other, neither is adjacent to this ship, since a planetary shield is in between this one, and the planetary entrance is in between these 2. Generally speaking, for a ship to be able to interact with a ship that is on a planet, then that first ship must also be on the planet. During the action phase, the player, as you might expect, takes actions. In order to take an action, the player follows this procedure. She declares the action she's taking, she spends any required energy or armed markers and rolls any associated dice, and she resolves the action. The player may continue to take actions until she decides not to or is unable to. Let's take a close look at each of the available actions the player may take. Several of the actions we'll discuss are known as minor actions. Minor actions are different from other actions because they may be taken during a move action without ending movement. If at any time the players are having difficulty remembering whether an action is a minor action or not, the player reference card clearly indicates minor in red next to all minor actions. Speaking of movement, let's cover that action first. Both engine outfits and impulse can be used to take move actions. Players gain movement when they take a move action. Movement may be spent to move the player's ship 1 space per movement point. Players are not required to spend all movement gained, but any movement not used will be lost once the move action ends. As previously mentioned, certain actions are considered minor actions, and minor actions may be taken without ending a player's move action. However, any other action requires the player to first end her movement before taking it. Impulse allows a player to move without spending energy or using her armed markers. To use Impulse, the player declares a move action, then flips her Impulse token, and then moves a number of spaces up to her Impulse value. Impulse tokens may not be used again until refreshed, which occurs during the status phase. Engine outfits are the primary means by which to get around the board. To use an engine, the player declares a move action with the engine outfit, takes an armed marker and places it on a used space. The player then spends 1 armed marker on a free used space on the engine outfit. The player then rolls the associated die and gains the number of movement points indicated minus any damage markers present on the engine. So in this case, the player would gain 2 movement. However, if 1 damage marker were on the engine, the player would have gained only 1 movement. Ships may move through spaces with other ships, but may not end their movement on the same space as another ship. However, a player may take an action on an adjacent space that is currently occupied by another ship by first spending 2 movement. As you can see here, this ship is on a salvage space. So if this player wanted to take that salvage action, she could spend 2 movement, but would not actually move her ship from the space she is in, but she can then perform an action as though her ship was on the space. There are numerous types of borders on the game board, each with its own set of rules for movement. Let's take a look at each of these borders. Normal space is represented by these dashed white lines, and there are no special rules for movement or line of sight. Star borders are denoted with solid red lines, as you can see here. Stars block line of sight, and any ship that moves through a star's border is immediately destroyed. Asteroid fields are represented by jagged yet solid orange lines. Asteroid fields block line of sight, and a ship may move through them, but such movement is dangerous. Upon entering an asteroid field, roll a d20. On a 1 through 10, the ship takes damage equal to the roll. Shields and abilities may then immediately be used to mitigate this damage. However, if an 11 through 20 is rolled, no damage is taken. Planetary shields are represented by solid glowing lines in red, green, or blue. Planetary shields do block line of sight. Players may attempt to move through them, but it is both dangerous and illegal and may have consequences. If a player crosses into or out of a planetary shield, she must roll a d20. If she rolls a 1 through 10, the shield prevents the crossing and the ship loses that one movement point. Additionally, the ship takes unblockable damage equal to the roll. If the ship still has any remaining movement, she may continue with her turn. If the ship rolls an 11 through 17, the ship successfully crosses the shield but is detected by local authorities. The ship is now an outlaw, and a 1,000 credit bounty is added to it. On a roll of 18 through 20, the ship successfully crosses the planetary shield undetected with 0 consequences. Planetary entrances are represented by dashed glowing lines in red, green, or blue. Entrances do block line of sight. An outlaw may not enter the planetary entrance of a lawful planet. If an innocent ship enters the planetary entrance of an unlawful planet, she gains a 1,000 credit bounty and becomes an outlaw. Nebula are represented by solid pink lines. Ships may fly through them, but there are certain risks. When a ship enters a nebula, the player rolls a d20. On a 1 through 10, the player subtracts an amount of energy from the ship's energy meter equal to the roll. A player may use shield outfits and abilities after the roll to mitigate this loss. If the player does not have enough energy to satisfy the loss, then for each energy she lacks, she must disarm an armed marker. If the player is still unable to satisfy the loss, then she is immediately stranded and may only use impulse if available. On the other hand, if the player rolls an 11 through 20, the ship enters the nebula without consequences. Once inside, there are no consequences for moving about or exiting the nebula. Debris blocks line of sight, and moving through debris fields is risky. Upon entering a debris field space, the player immediately rolls a d20. On a 1 through 3, the ship is immediately destroyed with no recourse. However, on a 4 through 20, the ship passes into the debris unscathed. A player may exit a debris field without further consequences, but keep in mind that debris fields generally are only a single space. So moving like this will result in another d20 roll. Gates are represented by solid green lines. Ships may move through gates as if they were normal space, but they may also use gates. A ship on a gate may spend 1 movement point to travel to any space on any other gate. It's important to note that gates are not considered when determining adjacency, range, or line of sight. For all purposes other than the special movement just described, gates are considered normal space. The Tigress gate is a special case. This gate is malfunctioning and does not connect to any other gate. Instead, if a player triggers the gate for special movement, the player rolls a d20. Her ship is then placed on the numbered spawn closest to that roll. So if this ship moved here, triggered the Tigress gate, rolled a 4, then it would jump to this spawn point because 5 is the closest spawn point to the number 4 currently on the board. In the case of a tie, the ship would go to the higher numbered spawn point. On a roll of 20, the player chooses which spawn point her ship is placed on in addition to gaining 1 fame point for luck. It's important to remember that when crossing a border that requires a die roll, the die roll must be resolved immediately. Sometimes a player may want to cross 2 borders with 1 movement. In this case, the player resolves the appropriate effects in the order of the crossing. So in this case, the player would first resolve the effect of attempting to cross the planetary shield and then resolve the effect of crossing into that nebula. Attack is another action a player may take on her turn. To attack, a player may use blasters, missiles, or in desperate situations, her engines to ram the enemy with her ship. Players may attempt to destroy another ship for fame, bounties, cargo cubes, or to accomplish certain missions. Combat is carried out by resolving the following 6 steps. The first step is to acquire the target. The attacker first determines if she can actually attack the target ship by confirming first range and then line of sight. Range is counted from the attacking ship to the defending ship in spaces on the game board. Blasters have a range of 1 and therefore can only target adjacent ships. Missiles, on the other hand, have a range of 2 to 6, so an adjacent ship specifically cannot be attacked, and the ship would have to be a little bit farther away. Some abilities can be used as attacks as well, and those ability cards will specify the range. In this case, let's say the Ghost Stalker is going to use its missile to attack the Swamp Rat. The Ghost Stalker is 2 spaces away from the Swamp Rat, and as we just said, the missiles have a range of 2 to 6 spaces, so the Swamp Rat is within range. Once range is confirmed, the players need to confirm line of sight. A ship is within line of sight if a straight line can be drawn from the center of the attacking ship's space to the center of the target ship's space without crossing through an impenetrable border. The 4 impenetrable borders, which we discussed during the borders section of this video, are asteroids, debris fields, stars, and planetary shields and entrances. As you can see, none of those borders are between these 2 ships. It's important to note, however, that while unexplored spaces are not technically borders, they do interrupt line of sight. So in this case, if the Ghost Stalker is using its missile, and you can see here 1, 2, 3 spaces are what are in between the Ghost Stalker and the Swamp Rat. Since these 3 spaces are in fact unexplored, a missile cannot be fired at the Swamp Rat because the Ghost Stalker does not have line of sight. Once the target has been acquired, the attacker declares her target and how many outfits and/or abilities she is using for the attack action. The attacker then spends the necessary armed markers for her outfits or energy if any abilities were being used. It's important to note that players may combine offensive attacks into a single attack or spread them out into separate attacks. For instance, let's say instead of the missile, the Ghost Stalker was going to use the blaster, and so she would be adjacent like this. Now she could spend 1 arm marker and attack with the blaster just that 1 time, and then on a second attack, use the other arm marker on the use space and attack again. Alternatively, she could spend 2 armed markers on 1 attack and fire the blaster both times in that single concentrated attack. Once the attack is declared, any ships being attacked are now given the chance to use shield outfits and/or abilities as defense. The defender spends any required armed markers or energy, and it's very important for the defender to realize that if shields or abilities are not declared now, they cannot be used after the damage roll. All participants now roll the dice associated with the outfits and abilities they've declared in the previous 2 steps. The attacker rolls first, followed by the defender. Now the attack is resolved. The total value of the attacker's dice roll plus any abilities she may have used equal her attack value. The defender does the same to find her defense value. Subtract the defense value from the attack value to calculate the damage taken by the defender. In this case, 5 damage was taken by the defender. On occasion, an attack may target multiple defenders, in which case each defender resolves the attack separately. Once the damage is resolved, defenders, and only defenders who have spent arm markers on shields outfits during step 3 may immediately rearm any of those for 1 energy apiece. Any markers not rearmed by the defenders in this way are placed on the disarmed spaces. It's also important to note that this does not apply to markers spent in previous actions. So let's take a moment to discuss damage in a bit more detail. Ships take damage in the form of these damage markers, as we've discussed previously. The player receiving the damage places the markers into her ship's hold. Each damage takes up 1 space in the hold, and any hold space with a damage marker is unusable until repaired. Repairs occur during the business phase. If the hold space where the damage is placed is occupied by a cargo cube, the cube is immediately jettisoned and set on the board in the same space as the ship. If the damage is placed on a used space of an outfit, any markers there are immediately removed and placed on a disarmed space. And that used space is no longer usable until repaired. Also, besides rendering the use space inoperable, damage has another effect on outfits by causing it to be less effective. Each damage placed on an outfit reduces rolls from that outfit by 1. So in this case, if we were rolling the D6 for a shield, that 5 would actually be a 4. Outfits are never destroyed by damage, but can be rendered unusable until repaired. Once a ship receives damage equal to or in excess of its number of hold spaces, the ship is immediately destroyed, as we've previously mentioned. We'll discuss in more detail about what happens when a ship is destroyed in the death and respawn sections of this video. Also, it should be noted that NPCs have a slightly different damage system, but we'll discuss that in the NPC section of the video. Ramming is a particularly desperate method of attack which may be used against an adjacent ship. Rather than activating missiles or blasters, the player activates her engines. Ramming has a range of 1 and requires line of sight. It follows the same rules for combat we've just discussed, except the attacking player takes damage as well. The damage dealt to the attacking player is unblockable, while the defending player is still free to use shields and abilities. Also, the attacker always receives the full amount of damage no matter how much the defender receives. If the attacker combines ramming with other attacks, only the ramming damage is applied to the attacker. It's also important to note that impulse may not be used for ramming. So in this case, if the Ghost Stalker rolled a 5 for her engines and the Swamp Rat rolled a 2 for her shields, the Ghost Stalker would take the full 5 damage from the engines and be destroyed, while the Swamp Rat would only take 3 damage and just barely survive. The next action we'll discuss involves missions. First, let's take a look at what players will find on mission cards. At the top of the card is the mission type, followed by a small blurb of flavor text. Underneath that, the player will find the objectives for this particular mission, followed by payment information, and finally, the sector tile on which the player must complete the mission. Completing missions earns players both fame points and credits. Missions come in a variety of types, pay varying amounts, and are either outlaw or lawful. A player without an active mission can choose to draw mission cards as a minor action while on a mission point. The player draws the top 3 mission cards from the mission deck, looks at them, and selects either a single mission or no mission. Missions that are not selected are discarded. If the player does accept the mission, she places it face down in her play area, and it becomes her active mission. No other player should know what mission she has selected at this point. A player may take the draw mission minor action once per mission point per turn, and a player may have at most 1 active mission at a time. Most objectives require taking an action to complete. These objectives must be completed before a player may deliver the mission and receive payment. In this case, the player must pick up passengers at the mission point in the Burning Horse sector. Immediately after the player completes the necessary objectives, the player then flips the mission card face up, as you see here, and reveals the mission to all players. The player then places the payment on the mission card, but cannot collect this payment until the mission is delivered. To deliver the mission and receive the payment, the player must go to the specified delivery point. At this point, the player declares a complete mission action, receives payment from the mission card, and earns 1 fame point. Also, if applicable, the player's bounty would increase at this point. The player flips this mission face down and sets it aside in her area. It is no longer an active mission, but the player keeps it until the end of the game. It's also important to note that the complete mission action is not a minor action, and therefore if a player takes this action, her movement ends. Some missions, such as this one that I just showed you, require a player to calculate the shortest possible route from mission pickup point to deliver point. Players count the fewest sector tiles possible to complete this route. Stars, unexplored areas, and gate movement do not count when determining the shortest route. A player who has completed a mission learns from this experience and is more likely to successfully complete future missions of the same type, directly after rolling a d20 for a mission. If the player wishes to roll again, she may discard 1 completed mission card of the same type and then roll. In this case, the player has 3 completed smuggler mission cards and is trying to complete this smuggler mission card. She rolled a 10, which is going to be a failure, and so she discards 1 smuggler mission card in order to re-roll this d20. However, regardless of the new result, the player must keep that result. At any time during a player's turn, she may abort a mission by taking the Jettison cargo minor action and place the active mission in the discard pile. There are no negative repercussions for this. If the mission card deck ever runs out, shuffle the discard pile to create a new deck. As previously mentioned, there are both lawful and outlaw missions. There are 3 types of each of these categories. In lawful, there are research, shuttle, and bounty hunter missions, while with the outlaws, there are smuggler, assassin, and thief missions. Detailed explanations and instructions are found on each of these cards for how to complete these missions. Now let's talk about cargo cubes. To acquire cargo cubes, players may buy, mine, harvest, or salvage. Each of these requires an action. Players may also collect cubes that are on the board as a minor action simply by being in the same space as them. Acquired cubes can then be sold at certain planets for credits and fame. Cargo cubes are kept in the hold in empty spaces and take up 1 space per cube. To buy cargo cubes, the player must be on the planet's buy space and must spend 1,000 credits to purchase 2 cubes of the indicated type. When buying cubes, the player must have enough room in her hold, but as long as she has the credits and the room, she may buy as many as she wants. A player may collect as many cargo cubes as she has room for, using the collect minor action. However, a player is not allowed to collect cubes she has jettisoned on the same turn that she jettisoned them. A player may mine asteroid fields, salvage from debris fields, or harvest from nebula. A player may take these actions multiple times on her turn. In order to do so, the player must be on the space which indicates the desired action and have at least 1 free space in her hold. The player then declares she is taking the desired action and rolls a d20 to determine the results. If the player rolls a 1 through 10 during a mining action, the ship is collided with an asteroid and suffers damage equal to the roll. If instead she rolls an 11 through 20, the ship receives 1 cargo cube of the indicated type. For a salvage action, if the player rolls a 1 through 3, the ship is destroyed. This cannot be prevented with shields or abilities. If, on the other hand, the player rolls a 4 through 20, she receives the cargo cube indicated. For a harvest action, if the player rolls a 1 through 10, the player's ship loses that much energy. Shields and abilities may be used after the roll to mitigate this loss. Just as if the player were crossing over the nebula border, if she does not have enough energy, then instead she will lose armed markers to the disarmed spaces. And if she still doesn't have enough, then she becomes immediately stranded. If, however, the player rolls an 11 through 20, she receives the indicated cargo cube. Once acquired and placed in the cargo hold, those cubes may only be rearranged during the business phase. Acquired cargo may be sold or jettisoned. To sell a cargo cube, the player needs to have cubes matching the icon on the planet's sell space. When the player's ship is on that space, she can then sell as many cargo cubes of that kind as she wants for 1,000 per cube. If the player completely empties her cargo hold of cubes during the sell action, she also receives 1 fame point. However, this only occurs if the player sold a minimum of 2 cubes. On occasion, players may find themselves holding on to cargo they simply don't want. In that case, the player may take the Jettison cargo minor action to remove 1 or more cubes from her hold and place them on the game board in the same space as her ship. Remember though, as previously mentioned, a player may not collect cubes she just jettisoned on the same turn. At the beginning of the game, the players are only familiar with a small portion of this drift system. To explore more sectors, the player may either scan the sector or make a blind jump. During the course of exploring the galaxy, players are also likely to discover numerous exploration tokens. Whether scanning or blind jumping, a ship must first be on the edge of unexplored space, and there must still be at least 1 sector tile in the tile deck. If the player takes the scan action, she spends 1 energy and then draws from the top of the tile deck. The drawn sector tile is flipped face up, and a symbol on the edge of that sector tile is matched with a symbol on the same edge of the sector tile as the player's ship. If other symbols on previously drawn sectors don't match, that's okay, as you can see here. If instead the player takes the minor action blind jump, she first declares exactly which soon-to-be adjacent space of the new sector tile she is going to move into. She then draws the new sector tile and must move into that space. It's important to note that if a player's ship is positioned so as to have access to 2 unexplored edges, she also must declare which edge she is exploring. Every sector tile is divided into 19 spaces of various borders, which we've already discussed. Each sector tile has a unique name. Left of that name is an icon, and below the name is a subtext. Both the icon and the subtext denote the type of sector. Many sectors will have mission points as well, which we've already discussed. Players are also likely to find spawn points, which can be starting locations at the beginning of the game for players and also a spot to respawn after death, which we'll discuss in more detail later. These spaces are where exploration tokens can be found, and you're already familiar with these symbols on the sides of the sectors. And of course, we've also already discussed the buy, sell, salvage, etc. type spaces that will be found on the sectors. So let's go back to the exploration tokens for a moment. Anytime a newly drawn sector tile has an exploration space, an exploration token is taken from the supply face down and placed on that space. The first player to move her ship onto the space where the exploration token claims it by flipping it face up. The player then claims whatever reward she finds and then places the exploration token on her ship mat. In this case, 1,000 credits. The 3 possible rewards are 1,000 credits, 1 fame point, and the always hilarious, nothing. Once a token is claimed by a player, no other player may claim it, and it never respawns on the space. The final action we need to discuss is rescuing a stranded player. So first, what exactly does it mean when a player is stranded? If a player has no energy and no armed markers, she is stranded. Even if the player still has her impulse available, as long as there's no armed markers and no energy, she's considered stranded. A stranded player may take no normal actions and may only use her impulse engine and take minor actions. Once a player has gained at least 1 energy or at least 1 armed marker, she is no longer considered stranded. The most common ways this happens is by making it to a planet or, as in this case, being rescued. A player adjacent to a stranded player may rescue her as long as she has at least 3 energy, which you see she does here. As a rescue action, the rescuer transfers 2 energy to the stranded player. The stranded player is not allowed to refuse this help. The rescuer then receives 1 fame point for rescuing that player. The previously stranded player may now immediately arm 2 markers. It's important to remember if a ship becomes stranded during a move action, such as by moving across the nebula border, the move action immediately ends, regardless of how much movement was left. And that covers everything the players may encounter during the action phase. Once a player ends her action phase, if she is on a planet, in other words, any space within the planetary border, she enters the business phase. If she's not on a planet, this phase is skipped entirely and the player moves to the status phase. Once the player moves into the business phase, no more actions may be taken this turn. A player is allowed to conduct as much business as she'd like, provided she has the necessary credits. Players may do the following 7 things during the business phase in any order. A player may recharge her energy meter up to its maximum capacity. In doing so, the player also rearms all of her disarmed markers. This does not cost anything. A player with a tier 1 or 2 ship may spend 1,000 credits to remove all damage markers from her ship. A tier 3 ship would cost 2,000 credits. A player may purchase additional outfits as long as they fit within her hold. A player may sell any undamaged outfit for half of its original cost rounded up. So this damaged engine outfit could not be sold. However, this blaster could be sold for half of 1,000 credits rounded up 1,000 credits. A player may rearrange any item in her ship's hold with the exception of damage markers and damaged outfits. A player may purchase a ship that is exactly 1 tier higher than her current ship. The cost to do so is displayed on the higher tier ship's mat. The player replaces her old ship mat and mini with the new ones. However, players keep all previous ability cards, outfits, any cargo cubes, and credits. These are all transferred to the new ship. Damage and bounty, however, are not transferred. A player gains 1 fame point for this upgrade. Finally, a player may purchase 1 fame point for 5,000 credits. However, a player may never purchase that final fame point that would win the game. Once a player completes her business phase if she's on a planet, or once she completes her action phase if she is not on a planet, she moves on to the status phase. During the status phase, the player must complete the following steps in exactly this order. First, the player makes sure to claim any unclaimed titles and fame points acquired during her turn. Title cards are drawn the first time any player's marker reaches a purple title space, which are yellow on the expansion track here. Only 1 title is ever drawn per space. The player's exhausted ability cards and impulse token are now refreshed by flipping them face up. The active player may arm any spent or disarmed markers at 1 energy apiece. If a spent marker is not armed, it is placed on a disarmed space. No markers can be left on any outfits. Let's go back and discuss titles in a bit more detail. Once a title is drawn, all players now compete to claim the title by completing its objective. In this case, give 2,000 credits to the player with the least amount of fame. Once a title is earned by a player, no other player may claim it, and the player who earned it gains the indicated fame points, in this case 1, as well as the skill listed on the card. In this case, once this game, next time you roll a natural 20, you receive 2 fame points instead of just 1. Players may claim multiple titles during their status phase, and once a title is claimed, its skill is immediately available to that player. Space is a dangerous place, and it's not uncommon for a player's ship to meet an untimely end. For instance, blowing up while on a salvage mission. If a ship is ever destroyed, it is immediately removed from the game board and placed on its owner's ship mat. If the player had an active mission, it is discarded. Any cargo cubes in the ship's hold are dropped in the space where the ship was destroyed. If the ship had a bounty, it's removed. If the ship was destroyed by another ship, the bounty is collected by that ship. If the active player is the one who died, then her turn ends immediately. The player who died resets her ship to full energy, rearms all markers, removes any damage the ship may have accrued. If the destroyed ship was tier 2 or 3, the player or NPC loses her next turn. If a ship is destroyed as a result of it initiating a ramming attack, that ship does not gain any fame that it would have for destroying the other ship, nor does it collect any bounty. Fortunately, when a player dies in Xayah, all is not lost. Through the miracle of cloning, or temporal disruption, or teleportation, or whatever, the player or NPC must respawn at the beginning of her next non-skipped turn. To respawn, the player rolls the d20 and places the ship on the unoccupied spawn point closest to the number rolled. In the case of a tie, the highest numbered spawn point wins. Or in the case of a 20, like you see here, the player chooses her spawn point and gains 1 fame point for luck. An occupied spawn point is always disregarded for the purposes of respawning. Immediately upon respawning, that ship takes a turn as normal. Players are allowed to give their credits to other players freely. This allows players to bribe other players and forge non-binding alliances. Ties or rule disputes should be resolved with a d20 die. If a rules dispute is solved this way, then players follow the result of the die roll for the rest of the game. And finally, we need to discuss the non-player characters which populate the game. These are autonomous ships which are controlled by a set of rules found on these cards. These 3 NPCs are included with the base game: the Enforcer, Merchant, and Scoundrel. And each of them has an NPC card which outlines its actions. The Enforcer is lawful and targets nearby outlaw ships. It moves towards them and attacks if possible. In the absence of a target, the Enforcer will patrol between lawful planets. If the Enforcer is ever attacked, it will retaliate and can never have a bounty placed on it. The Merchant is a neutral, peaceful trader. During each of its turns, the Merchant will move along a trade route, and each time it arrives on a planet's cell space, it gains 1,000 credits. As the game progresses, the Merchant will become a more and more tempting target until eventually the temptation is too great. The Scoundrel is a dirty pirate outlaw. He hunts down and attacks any nearby innocent ships and then runs away. However, despite being a bit of a coward, if attacked, he will still attempt to retaliate. And the Scoundrel may never enter a lawful planet since it always has a bounty on it. Also, no matter what, the Scoundrel will never target the Enforcer because, after all, like we said, dirty pirates are cowards. Whichever player is dealt the NPC's card at the beginning of the game is responsible for carrying out its actions throughout the game. However, that player is not actually affiliated with the NPC in any way. NPCs are introduced onto the board only once their sector tile is placed on the board as listed on their NPC card, and then the NPC is placed on the spawn point on that tile. The Merchant is a little bit different since it has 5 different possible planets that it could spawn on. It will spawn on the second of those planets to be revealed. When an NPC is destroyed, it spawns randomly, just like any other ship. NPCs take their turns immediately following the players controlling it. When it's an NPC's turn, the player who is controlling it simply reads the NPC card from top to bottom and follows directions. When moving, NPCs will at all costs avoid asteroid fields, debris fields, planetary shields, and stars. Nebula have no effect on NPCs. NPCs can use gates. However, they can never move into unexplored territory. NPCs always take the most direct route to their target, and if there is more than one direct route the controlling player chooses. Keep in mind, though, that when choosing the direct route, NPCs still are going to avoid at all costs asteroid fields, debris fields, planetary shields, and stars. Due to the random layout of the game board, it is possible for sectors to be unreachable without crossing through the normally avoided borders. In this case, the NPC will travel through the safest and most direct path to reach the sector. The safest path is determined in the following order. An NPC will first try to cross asteroid fields, then debris fields, and then, as a very last resort, planetary shields. NPCs apply the effects of these borders the same way a player does. The NPC cards also have clear instructions for defense in this blue box. This yellow box indicates how much damage the NPC can take, and the green box is the reward the player receives who destroys the ship. Now, all of that is a lot of rules to keep track of, but fortunately on the back of the rulebook is this fantastic reference guide that helps you remember what happens when you cross different borders and all the different ways to get fame points, icon keys, the order of combat, and all the other things you may need to remember while playing Xayah. And that is everything that you need to know to play Xayah Legends of a Drift System. Now, if you are interested in the expansion, be sure to keep your eyes tuned to this channel. I will be making an expansion how to play video soon as well. And once that's out, come back again for a gameplay video. Either I might get a 2-player game going or possibly a solo game. We'll see how it works out. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you like my channel, please subscribe. If you want to support the channel in any way, check the description below for ways that you can do that. And until next time, if you're bored online, bored offline.